Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. The episode today, we're going to focus on event and trade show strategies for small business. As always, I'm joined by Paul, Ken, and Ian, and we're going to get right into events, trade shows, and what are we going to do as a small business. So we're recording this episode in mid-2022, and so some parts of the world are very, very open, and other parts are just emerging from the COVID lockdowns and various restrictions. And so for some, this means it'll start to be the first time in a couple of years that they've been able to attend an in-person conference, event, or, get the booth all shipped out to do a new trade show. So in this episode, we'll discuss ways to make those events and trade shows more meaningful and effective for you, whether you're a first-time attendee or you've put thousands of dollars into a trade show complete with being tier 1 sponsor. We'll give you some ideas on how to make the most of it for your business. Now, for the purpose of this conversation, when we talk about events, we mean a one-day event or less than one day, so half-day event, that kind of thing. And conferences and trade shows are going to be multiple-day events. So with that, let's kick off. I've got some questions for all you guys here, but let's kick off with kind of the elephant in the room, I'm going to say, because events and trade shows can be very tiring. They can be a little bit negative. So I want to start off with hearing about the worst part of events and trade shows for each of you, and I'll go first. So the worst part of them is as we get going out of COVID, I'll be participating in events around town. And these events are business events that happen once a month. And we've got some of the organizers that insist on changing the venue every single month. So sometimes it's in the north part of the city, downtown, the east part, whatnot. And for me, it drives me crazy because I want to know where we are. I want to be able to park easily. I want to be able to plan my day around getting to this event, no problem. I want to save all my energy for being at the event, meeting people and learning from the keynote speaker or whatever. So for me, one of the worst parts of events is when they switch the venue around every single month. So let me hand it over to you, Paul. What's the worst part of events or trade shows for you?
Going to them.
Going to them. Why am I not surprised?
But honestly, I think it's really the planning, which you touched on, especially if it's a half day or one day. There's a lot of planning, and it takes as much planning or almost as much planning to go to a one-day event as a 3-day event. You still have to have, are you going to have any giveaways? Are you going to have a banner? Or are you going to have some kind of digital slideshow? How are you going to attract people to your booth, and what are you going to talk to them? What product or service are you going to showcase if you offer more than one? So to me, it's the planning part of it, not so much the event itself. And like you touched on, parking it, because they love to have these in the middle of downtown, which makes sense. The problem with that is, like here in St. Louis, there's no parking. But yeah, to me, it's the planning is the biggest part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Ken?
Well, my biggest pet peeve about any of these types of events are the freeloaders. The people who come and sell to you, but don't take the courtesy to actually spend money and get a booth. I just think that's incredibly rude. They take up your time. If it's a half day or a full day event and you've paid for event sponsorship or have, some stage in some way, that you're there to invest in your own business and to grow it, and have your time taken up by people who all they want to do is come to you and sell because they were too cheap or too inconsiderate to buy a booth space. That really, really torques me off. And honestly, there are some events that I will not ever go to again because that's all they are. And it's so frustrating, so disappointing. And honestly, it's so rude. And to the point where I would never consider doing business with people who came up and approached me in those environments.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Ian, what about you? Pet peeves?
Well, yeah. First of all, I want to say, you guys are so tough on people, having a variety of venues, they have a personal affirmation that they wake up to each day that says, I am going to have variety in my life because it's the spice of life and I need more spice. So come on, give them a break.
I thought it was, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and by golly, people like me.
That's a good one too, Ken.
right.
I like that one. One of my biggest challenges with, and these are bigger trade shows, right? Where the ones I'm thinking about, especially from the corporate world or in supporting clients, is cross-border management of your materials. So whether you're in the U.S. and you're presenting in Canada or another country, or whether you're in Canada and presenting in the U.S. or another country, the cross-border stuff, first of all, super expensive because of customs. But I've had some disastrous experiences where customs holds your stuff past, like 2 weeks past the event. And just to give you a little anecdote, this was when I was in the corporate world. We had one event that we were at, and this was actually within Canada. So I forget what held up. We were a Canadian company. It was a shipping issue with whoever was shipping our materials.
Yeah.
And even though we always built in buffer, the booth, the materials, nothing got there, except luckily the team had some pop-up banners with them. We sent them with them just as a contingency plan, just in case. You always have a contingency plan. And our sales team had to gather furniture and potted plants just to create like a sitting space where our booth would have been. And it actually worked out really well. They actually like bought food and brought it in. And anyways, you have to watch the rules. So that's one of them, is getting the stuff to the event. Even with the best planning and organization, sometimes it goes awry. And then I want to share one more. I think this is really important, is the lack of commitment from the team on the ground. So this doesn't always happen in smaller businesses where it might be the business owner and one or two other people. But in bigger corporations, sometimes I would see a total lack of commitment from the sales team. Their job is to sell. Their job is to create relationships. And they would sit in chairs behind a desk at a booth that you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars for and not engage with people. And so that's a big pet peeve of mine, is like, you're there to build relationships. You got to put some effort into it and commit to that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's nothing, but from an attendee point of view, there's also nothing worse than walking by a booth and you got 5 people kind of looking at you going, please come talk to me. Right.
And the only thing that would draw you in is the tchotchkes, right? Like, you're
Right,
like, I want that pen. I want that squishy
fridge
toy.
magnet. I need that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. We didn't touch on tchotchkes yet. Okay, well, good. Well, there are some positive things about events, conferences, and trade shows, and so we'll get into the flip side of that. But we just had to talk about the elephant in the room. These things are, it is a bit of a tough tactic, and it is a little bit exhausting. But there's some good things and good business that can come out of these. So, Paul, I'm going to ask you the first question. What can a business owner do to find out about and plan to attend events and trade shows relevant to their business?
Well, obviously there's industry publications. I suppose you could look on Google. I don't know what kind of results you get with that, but the local chambers, any area that you would want to attend a trade show, and local chambers probably have a list of those. The venues themselves, if you go to their website, they probably have a list of shows and events that are going to be there. Of course, some of those websites aren't laid out that well as far as searching and finding them, but they are there. And if all else fails, pick up the phone and call them. Let them dig through it. Yeah. Because they want people to attend, because if people don't attend the trade show, then the trade show is a bust. So they are willing to help you. Those are probably the best ways to find out about them. Ask your colleagues. They probably know something you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. About annual events, or the best thing to go to is, but you touched on a good point. These trade shows and events in and of themselves, typically, unless it's a nonprofit association, that is their service to make money. So they're looking for people to attend, people to display. Like, they're going to do everything they can to help you into the door, whether it is as an attendee or as someone who's displaying their booth. So that's a great point. Now, Ken, I got a second question for you here. Now, we complained about pet peeves at the
Right.
top of the show, but there must be some good that comes out of events and trade show. So tell me, why is it worth it for business owners to attend, like as an attendee, or display at, like having a booth at events or trade shows?
Well, I think, the biggest reason is, I mean, if you've picked the right trade show or event, is that your ideal customers are all located in the same place at the same time.
Hmm.
And so you have an opportunity to make a face-to-face connection with people at those types of events. So that can be incredibly powerful. It requires planning and preparation. Obviously, you do need to select the right events, because not all of these events are equal. I mean, I've done everything from very industry specific events where we know the exact audience and the type of people who are going to be there, to general small business marketing expos where any old small business can be there and anybody from off the street can walk in and mill around and visit, because there's no cost to attend these things. So you need to definitely pick and choose your battles, plan for it. It can be a great way to network, to build relationships. If you have an opportunity to present, that's always fantastic. I'm a huge fan of education. I think that's always the best thing. Even if it's, in booth education, have something there that's going to draw people in, to get them to want to come by and talk to you. And you always have to think about this concept of value first. You've got to focus on adding value before you ever start talking about the sale. So you have to demonstrate the value of your product or service in whatever capacity you can. And yeah, so you definitely, I'm sure we'll talk more about this as you go, but you definitely want to make sure you have a strategy to capitalize on the leads and the lead opportunities that you can get from these events.
I want to ask you about that, comparing the very targeted industry events compared to, say, those general, small business expos.
Yeah.
Have you been at both? And is one sort of more effective than the other? This might be a leading question. I have my own opinion about that, but do tell me.
I don't think the general business expos have ever yielded any business for me whatsoever. They're generally not very expensive to have a booth at. But you're talking about, I mean, for us, we rarely work with a startup business. And a lot of these booths, I think, are literal. I mean, a lot of these small business expo kinds of things, I think a lot of people just walk around literally to pick up whatever tchotchkes they can, and maybe pitch an idea of what they're thinking about starting their business to you to see what your thoughts are. I don't see any value in that. So I've stopped doing those. The industry specific ones, where I know people are going to go there. And I know that even if it's an industry related to something that I don't personally do, if they are a buyer of my solutions, and I care about working with that niche or that industry, then it's hugely valuable, incredibly valuable. It's maybe one of the best things you can do.
Great. I always wondered about those. I haven't been to or displayed at the general ones. So
I find that they're very frustrating.
Or maybe even not for. I mean, all of us on the show here are very specific in the services that we sell. Maybe something more consumer oriented. It might be a good focus, because there's tons of them and they're back every single year, so they're working for someone. So
yeah, I think if you're more B2C, it make a lot more sense for the general kinds of businesses. If you're B2B, and offer really service heavy as opposed to product heavy, I think you need to challenge yourself. Is that the right investment for you?
yeah, absolutely. Ian, Time and money are two of the reasons many business owners give us as to why they are not participating in events or trade shows. If you were to disagree with these reasons, what would you say to the business owner?
Yeah. I would start off, first of all, by saying, business owner, you have to understand all good marketing takes investment of some kind, whether it's time, money, resources, sweat equity, whatever it is, it takes investment on your behalf. So let's get that out of the way. So, the question isn't even whether it costs time or money or resources. Is this the best investment I can make with my marketing dollars right where I am now? And I think that's the key is that you need to go into this with an understanding of what are my expectations. First of all, what Ken talked about, you have to ask, is my ideal customer there? If they're not there, what are you doing? Like, don't burn money, time, and energy. But if your prospective customers are attending the trade show, then yeah, it could be an ideal opportunity to be there, to invest wisely. Paul talked about having a plan. Of course, you need a plan. If you just go and expect to, sit behind a table and the money's just going to be rolling in, like you're not making a sound investment. Just a few things that, when I was thinking about this, Jen, is some reasons to go to trade shows, right? I think this was kind of a way for a business owner to consider this, is sometimes attending a trade show is about relationship building and signing deals. Like, that happens at trade shows all the time. You can sign deals at trade shows if you're at the right trade show, if you're presenting well, and if your ideal customers are there and you're offering, what Ken said, something of value to them, right? Sometimes going to a trade show is about launching a new product and getting the exposure in the industry, right? Especially industry events. Sometimes it's about planting seeds, creating great impressions that offer opportunities for you to follow up. Because sometimes the deals aren't signed at the event, but it gives you a reason and a connection to then say, hey, John, can I follow up with you in a week? And let's touch base on this, and I'll take you out to lunch, or whatever it is, right? However your sales process works. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I've seen this, especially in the larger businesses, is that sometimes attending trade shows is simply table stakes. Like, if you're in an industry and you're not at the trade show, you're actually sending a huge message to your prospective customers and to the industry itself. And sometimes businesses do that on purpose because they have a message to send, like they're dissatisfied with the association or whatever. But you have to be super, super careful about that. But yeah, I think it's all about, making sure you invest wisely. And to do that, you need a plan, you need to research, and then you need to execute really well. And then that will produce great return on investment.
I think it's important to put together the entire costs of the investment. I mean, I do think that you should look at it as an investment, absolutely. But there's time to that you're away from doing what you normally do to attend the event, maybe even to travel to get there, if it's a national or a regional event, or even downtown Toronto. I'm sure that if you're on the outskirts and you got to go downtown, you need to plan a half a day minimum for a couple-hour conference, right?
Yep.
So so there's a cost to that. There's a cost of the transportation to get there. There's a cost of the preparation time, that you need to spend. So factor all of that in so that you can get a real good gauge of your return on investment, because on the surface it may sound like, oh, it's only $750 to go to this thing. Cool. Yeah. I can afford that. Well, can you really? I mean, is that the best? Would you be better spending that money in another way?
And the end of that ROI equation too, Ken, I agree with everything you just said. I think it's important also to point out that the end of that equation is the start of it is return, right? So as a business owner, you also need to understand, like, what are the potential opportunity costs if I don't go, and to figure that out, what's a realistic, how much is a deal worth that you may be able to land there, and how many deals do you think you can land or plant the seeds to land? And then like, what are your success metrics for going to a show? I think that's really important. Like you should have that nailed down and say, hey, to be successful at this trade show, we need to, maybe it's connect with 25 people in this industry. Maybe it's to land one deal. You have to figure that out yourself. But yeah, like if you don't do that, then you'll actually have only this gut feeling of how successful your time, energy, resources were. But yeah, and don't forget those tchotchkes. Those cost money too.
Well,
Squishy toys and
all of the booth materials.
Yeah.
Not only paying for the booth space, but getting your displays. The shipping of all of those. Depending on the venue, you may have to hire people to actually put up your displays.
The models that are pretending to be salespeople.
Yeah. You've worked a different set of shows than I have, I guess.
Hey, I've seen it all, man. It's funny. Yeah.
He goes to those ones in Las Vegas.
I've seen company. Well, if you've ever been to a computer show or like a
Oh,
technology show,
Yeah.
half those people do not work for the business. Half of them
Right.
are models making
Yes.
their booth look very appealing. So.
Very very appealing. Yes, very true. Let's not go there.
No,
At least while
we're
on
taking
there.
a turn.
No.
The podcast is taking a turn.
Yes. Oh, good. Okay, Paul, what can folks do pre-event? So when I'm talking about events, I'm talking about a 1 day or less or type of show to be sure they get the best out of it business-wise. So whether they're going to attend or whether they're going to have a booth there.
Don't wait till the last minute to try and figure it out. Because time can get away from you. Oh, gee, this thing's tomorrow. Maybe I should put some thought into it. It can easily happen, but most of these events, they have something on social media, LinkedIn, God forbid a Facebook group, but they have something on social media. They're going to have something on their website about it, but get a list of attendees that, the ones that have a booth, because you're not going to be in your booth all the time. You're also going to be walking around, and there's probably certain people that you want to talk to, and maybe you can reach out on social media, post something. So it's kind of not completely weird and cold when you approach them, but they all have booths there. So they expect people to come up and talk to them, and everybody does it. And like I said, there's probably certain people or businesses that you want to talk to. So get that list and figure out who's going to be there, who you want to talk to. And so you're not just wandering around aimlessly. And that's, again, it comes down to planning. If you want to make the most out of any event, it comes down to planning.
Yeah, no, you're so right. How many times have you gone to a show and you see a bunch of people outside, sort of the main entrance, right? Like mapping out who should I see today? Like that should have been done, ages ago. But
who do I want to avoid?
That
happens
too, right? Your competition or, that kind of thing. So Ken, what about trade shows? So we're talking multi-day, large events. Where your company is committed to a booth. So what can the team do? So let me rephrase this. So it's a big show. You have a big booth, meaning it's more than just yourself as the business owner. Perhaps you've either hired a team or you're bringing your team with you. Now, what are you going to do to prep the team, to prep everybody to make sure that this is a good use of time and money for your business to be at the show?
Yeah, well, I think, kind of to dovetail on some of the things that Paul was talking about, certainly including it in like your email newsletter, especially if it's going out to people who are likely to be attendees, to let them know to find you there. Maybe even doing a press release, to announce that you're going to be at a show. Maybe even advertising in an industry publication if there's one that's related to the show. Give people a reason to come by and meet you at the booth. That could be coming up with a trade show offer that you want to launch. Maybe it's if you have something you want to demo, a product, or a solution that you want to demo. Make sure you have that ready to go. absolutely have an automated booking calendar right there, so that as people come up to your booth, they can sign up and schedule appointments for not only during the conference, and blocking and setting aside a period of time for that, because there's nothing better than a face-to-face conversation and in real time when people are expressing a need. But also, give people the ability, because a lot of people are going for these events for a lot of education, or other peer networking related things. So you definitely need to have a strategy so that they can book time after the event with you to talk about things. Um, you definitely need to think about, if you have people there who don't go to trade shows very often, they need to think about their message. How do you make that as clear and simple and concise as possible to, tailored to the ideal audience of the people who are going to be there? And then, if you're going to get a list of attendees from the event sponsor, some of them give you the attendees. In some cases, you have to buy it. It's an add-on service,
Yeah.
where you have the ability to maybe scan a badge to capture the contact information of the people who visited your booth. In other cases, they just give it to you. Find out that in advance, because that helps you plan and make the most out of the booth. The reason that you're at the booth is you want to meet people and you want to get leads and you want to close deals. And so all of that takes preparation. Also look, like Paul said, look at the other attendees that are there as booth or sponsors, because some of those you might want to reach out and build a partnership with. For example, for us, we do digital marketing. If I were to go to a home remodeling trade show, and we had a booth there, I might want to build a relationship with, an operational system, that helps somebody do the project management for construction projects. I might want to build a relationship with that software so that maybe we could become really good referral partners for each other. So you want to take advantage of all of those kinds of things. It's not just about you being there and showing up. You do have to work to draw people into the booth. Sometimes the booth location that you want has already been taken. Sometimes it's too expensive for you to be able to justify that investment. So what can you do? I mean, I've done things in the past where, this is going back decades, but we had a putting green, and it was actually an Air Force conference that I worked, and we were an information technology company. And we were trying to meet, all of these people who were looking for IT solutions, who were government contractors or government employees, I should say. And, we, with this putting green, we had a little giveaway. If you made a hole in, if you actually sank the putt, you got registered for a drawing. But what that did is people lined up and they waited for their chance to hit a putt. So you had a couple of people working the putting green. We had somebody working the line, talking to people while they were waiting in line, because what else were they going to do? They had to stand there. They were a captive audience. So you could start up conversations, learn about people, set sidebar conversations, get all of that stuff done. It was before the day where there were really good, online booking calendars. So we couldn't really take advantage of that. It had to be more pencil and paper, but you definitely have to think about all of those things. Are you going to give away all of your tchotchkes for free? Or is it some, in some cases you want to have stuff to just have people come by and pick up some candy at the booth, or healthy snack if it's more appropriate, or whatever, just so you have a chance to start a little bit of a conversation.
Sure.
People, there are people who are always the hit and run, where they're going to walk by and grab and go.
Yeah.
But most of the time people will give you the courtesy of having at least a couple of second conversation, if not longer, if they're going to, pick out a piece of candy or a piece of fruit or something like that from your booth. So you need to have a strategy to draw people in. And then ideally, think about how you can take offline to online. What is the best way for you to be able to get people from an offline, in-person event, how can you get them to online? So if you have the ability to do geo-targeting of the event, set that up, capture the people digitally so that maybe you can follow them with ads after the event, or even targeting ads to them inside of the event to help them get to your booth in the first place. Which you could do with something like Facebook ads. You could run Facebook ads within the perimeter of the event, and anybody who's inside that perimeter of the event who opens up Facebook, might see your ad, and that may be the thing that helps you get somebody there.
Absolutely. What is your opinion on if you have a team there with you, like team uniforms or branded sort of outfits? What's your thinking on that?
Oh yeah, you definitely want to have branded apparel. And I think, you need to think about, like, if you're going to be going to a home remodeling or a painter related trade show, wearing a suit and tie probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Right.
So you need to think about attire that's appropriate for the event. But it should be branded for sure.
Yeah, you should look like the team in the booth, right?
Yeah, because it's an opportunity to reinforce the branding and build your product and your company and your solution awareness. So you need every opportunity you can to reinforce that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, those are good tips. That's great. Ian, okay, so what if an important trade show is coming up and there is either legitimately not the budget? I know you had a good argument before for no time, no money, but say it's too expensive to have a booth there. It's not the right time in your launch cycle with your company. So you're like, okay, having a booth at this show, nah, it doesn't make sense to do it. However, maybe I should go as an attendee. What kind of tips, tricks, hints, strategies could you give to that business owner who is attending an important trade show as an attendee? Like, can they still come away with leads and whatnot? What's your thinking on that?
Yeah. Before I answer that, though, I have to add on something to Ken's answer about the apparel. I always recommend what Ken said, except if you're like a management consulting firm and your target audience is executives and they're always dressed in suits, you want to be dressed in suits with a name tag, right? You don't want to be dressed in golf shirts. You have to know your audience. So that's all I would add to that.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Ken?
No, I think you should have a logo emblazoned on your blazer or your suit. No, of course.
I think you should be in hold on, I Googled it. Stuart Hughes Diamond Edition suit worth $778,000. I think that's what you should be wearing. So
yeah.
Obviously, I wear branded apparel. So, going back to your question though, Jen, I absolutely think it is a very relevant point. I think if you can't afford to exhibit at a trade show, actually in the corporate world, when we were considering what trade shows to send our teams to, one of our key criteria, it wasn't the only criteria, but one of the key criteria, if it was a new trade show for us, was that someone, whether a marketing person, a salesperson, an executive, had to have already attended that show at least once and could give us basically a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats, right, for that event, so that we could understand the potential value of it. So I think going to events is very, very valuable for reconnaissance. But if you can't afford to be there as an exhibitor, then yes, go to the trade show, whether it's you or send your sales team, mingle with the customers that you're trying to connect with, attend every possible event you can possibly go to, sit at a table at lunch and talk to the people there, go to the after hours events and mingle with people, be involved, talk with them. It's a networking opportunity, 100%. And of course, usually at these shows, there's professional development. You can also do some competitive analysis. Are our competitors there? What are they doing to help frame your investment if you choose to do it next year or next quarter? But other things you could do as an attendee and not an exhibitor is you could email top prospects and just ask them, hey, are you going to the show? I'm actually attending it. Do you want to connect and grab a bite together and just chat? What things are interesting you most about attending it? But be savvy, right? Review the expo map. You were talking about people, when they're about to walk through the doors and the map's
Yes.
there,
Doing their planning.
be savvy, like plan out, which booths do I want to look at? Who are, potential prospects, strategic partners. Look at the speakers list, try to set up meetings with top prospects. The very best thing to do, obviously, is get on the speakers list. If you can, even if you're not exhibiting, if you can get on a speakers list, you've just created authority as an expert in the space, and it gives you instant credibility, assuming you can speak okay.
I think we have another podcast topic, don't we?
Yeah, like don't
I
if you
think
can't
that
do
is
it.
Yeah, it's a great podcast topic, actually.
Yeah.
Ken talked about geofencing, right?
Mm.
And that was in the context of if you're exhibiting or speaking, but even if you're not, heck, geofence. I was going to say geofence the crap out of that event, but geofence and offer value, but all with the purpose of retargeting afterwards, right? If you can move it off the paid into retargeting and then follow up and obviously offering value, even as a non-exhibitor, you could run a contest, right? As long as you have connections in the industry, you could run a contest and say, hey, while you're at the event, share your experience and you'll be entered into a contest by using this hashtag. And it gives you greater exposure, gives you a great reason for people to include you in the conversation. And then usually this is for exhibitors, but you could even do like the hotels that people are staying at. You can do gift drops or flyer drops to people's rooms. So you can often do those even if you're not an exhibitor. So think about that. Like, is there something I could have waiting in their room, whether it's a gift, whether it's chocolates with our logo, whether it's, a flyer, all with the purpose of driving them to an action, right? Not unless your only purpose is for exposure, but there's lots you can do.
So how would you do that? I mean, how do you know which, because hotels have dozens of rooms or hundreds of rooms in some cases that are not for event participants.
So yeah, usually it works best when it's at a convention center with a hotel attached to it, right? That's easy because the hotel actually knows who the attendees are to the event because it's a connected event to their hotel. And they get a convention rate for their hotel rooms. So the hotel knows all that. And you would just say, hey, I want to put this in the rooms. How much would that cost? And you can coordinate it for a particular day, like a move-in day. You can do it for the last night of the event. You can pre-plan that. And I've done that before, and it can be very, very successful. Especially, don't forget this, you have to have a clear call to action that's valuable to them. And you have to have a way of tracking. Like, don't do anything if you can't track it, unless it's just for exposure and you're happy with, exposure's enough and I can't measure it.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Wow.
Right.
Those are good ideas.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I've got one that's kind of similar to that. I mean, it's a little bit more elaborate, and you always need to be respectful of the event that you're going to. But there may be an opportunity where you could have, if you could rent a meeting room or even sponsoring a happy hour at a restaurant that's kind of a parallel event to the conference. You can, and again, you have to invite people in advance and have a strategy of inviting people when you get to the show. But that can be an effective way to where maybe you can have your own little mini booth at a fraction of the cost, but still be able to connect with some really important people in a group kind of setting.
Do you want to hear a funny one? So I've actually known a company that did this where they did have a booth, but it wasn't in the greatest spot for whatever reason, right? And so what they did, and again, you have to watch the rules and guidelines of the association, the convention center, whatever it is, because oftentimes with food and drink, there's some pretty stringent rules. But they actually got around that by they basically did a beer and wine bus. And so they brought this bus up in front and they advertised it. And it was like a happy hour bus. And so people would just come on during the day, like, so you do it like late afternoon when, you know, some of the events are winding down and before the actual after hours event. So, you know, association people and convention planners, don't get mad at me. I've seen this and it was actually quite humorous and it worked. But they attracted lots of people because people were like, they were going to go get a beer anyways with their buddies. And you just provided it in your own venue with your own, you know, marketing and, you know, gave them a flyer at the same time. They might not have understood it after too many beers, but you pinned it to their jacket.
Yeah, there you go.
So think out of the box.
Yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome. You guys have had some very good recommendations and ideas. Any last words of advice that we didn't cover at all? Anything at all?
Well, the only thing I can think of, Ian mentioned speakers, which we kind of didn't touch on. And again, all this planning can make you not even want to go. But if there's certain speakers, if you have a booth there and there's certain speakers or a speaker that you want to see, you have to make sure there's going to be someone to man the booth, so to speak, while you go listen to this. So again, it goes back to not waiting till you're standing out the door to figure out what you want to accomplish at this event.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The one last thing I talk about is if you are taking a team with you, just really make sure that the team is briefed on, you know, booth duty, who's on first, when breaks are. I mean, it sounds pretty lame, but these things can be very, very tiring. And so you want to keep the energy up. You want to keep the folks focused. And then if you have folks on your team, this is the first time they're doing any kind of booth duty, you really want to prep them for, okay, you know, when there's downtime, you'd be doing this, you know, it is going to be tiring, you know, mentally prepare for it so you can be on your best. Because there's nothing like the last day where you're, you know, nobody's selling anything. Everybody just wants to go home. So.
Yeah. I think you also want to make sure that you factor in some comfort things. You know, make sure you have water, you know, that you can drink while you're at the booth, you know, or even something, a light snack, because there will be ebbs and flows in the traffic. The seating, you know, I mean, a lot of times you get you stand on concrete floors.
Yeah.
They give you a chunk of carpet there's no padding underneath it. So, you know, making sure that you have the proper foot attire is huge.
You can get the padding though. It's just extra, Ken.
Exactly. So you have to.
It really is.
Yeah. I mean, if you go cheap, you might really regret it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, even I know you don't. You know, you don't really want to sit at these things, but sometimes you just need to sit because standing on your feet for hours at a time can be a real challenge for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And so, you know, having a chair or two at the booth where you're still there, you know, and nobody's going to have any issue if they see you sitting down while it's a slow time in the booth. You know, just look alert and be always ready to engage with people. But, you know, you just factor those things in. I mean, if you try to cut out all of those things that provide some comfort, you might wind up being pretty miserable there. And if you're miserable, you're probably not presenting yourself in the best light.
That's a great
I speak
point.
from experience, don't I, Paul?
Yeah, well, you can get one of those inversion things and just hang around in that. That'll attract some attention.
That's right.
Yeah,
really.
really.
Right.
I was just going to add, you know, the biggest flop I've seen in these, and I think it's probably been beaten into us through this conversation or beaten into our listeners, is you have to plan, right? And you have to, like Jen talked about, scheduling, you know, having a plan. Here's the key: mediocre plans and mediocre execution equals mediocre results. So if you want to get the most out of this, don't like just think that you can float through it.
Yeah.
Put effort, put time, put energy, and you're going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the other thing too is have a great follow-up strategy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, So you're not going to be able to meet everybody that you want to meet at these events. Some people will just not come to the booth. A lot of people, when they're attending, the conferences are in usually really appealing places to get people to go in the first place. So they may duck out from the, they may attend the education and the networking sessions where they're meeting with their peers, but they may duck out during the actual trade show portion of the event. So, be prepared to call or hire somebody to call and follow up with the event attendees, because you probably didn't have a chance to meet with them, with all of them, and so you're leaving opportunity on the table, if you don't have that aspect in place as well. I would even recommend, pre-writing an email series, develop a social media posting series, so that when you get back, all you have to, or maybe even have it scheduled, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend having it scheduled until you get back, just because you want to be able to adapt to any situation that happens at the trade show. But have all those ready to go, so that all you have to do is just load them and hit schedule, and boom, they just go out. And I think that is going to be a really way to help you capitalize and get even more out of the event.
Yeah.
And Ken, you just tweaked a memory for me. One of the key things too is that have especially if you have multiple people at your trade show booth, make sure you have some central way of recording what the next actions are for your team, because that's, the follow-up you just said is key. But where I've seen it before is each person has like a little pad, and that doesn't work exceptionally well if you have multiple people. So especially if you're trying to give visibility to the broader team, and maybe there's people helping you do the follow-up, you need some sort of central way of, whether it's a CRM or whatever it is, right, that they can just punch in a follow-up in their phone while they're at the event, and it gets updated in the CRM.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, this is pre-COVID, so I don't know what people's thoughts would be about this now, but we actually had I bought an iPad just specifically for events, where I had the booking calendar set up, and people can go automatically book a time that works for them on an iPad, be done with it. We've got the meeting set, we're ready to go. It has the automated reminders sequence that's already ready to go to help them, remember to show up, because they're at a trade show, there's a lot going on. So,
and they're tired too, right?
Yeah. Yes. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. So thank you for joining us today for this topic on event and trade show strategies for small business. If the show has been helpful to you, please share it with others by telling them about the podcast. And we'll see you next week for our next episode.